My name is Brad Dubois. I'm the general manager of Alberta Beef Producers. We are recording this meeting tonight, so we do plan to post it on our communication tools at Alberta Beef Producers. We're also going to provide that recording to the agency, and they will be posting it as well and sharing it. And the idea behind this meeting tonight is to try to bring as many of our remitters in Alberta up to date on the changes that they're going to be seeing come into effect on August 1st of 2025. The agency is with us tonight, and they're going to be providing an overview of what that all looks like and how it may or may not affect you as a remitter in Alberta. Reminder, we are recording. How we're going to answer, we want to keep this very, very casual, so it's not a massive group. We would welcome individuals to put their hand up. If you put your hand up, I will recognize you, and you can go ahead and ask your question at the end of the presentation, or you could use the chat function. And Karen's going to be monitoring. I have one of my staff, Beef Production and Extension. Karen Schmidt is with us. She's going to be helping with the technical side of things because I can't. And so Karen will watch that chat, and she will read those questions if there's any questions in the chat. So please, we welcome all of you to take the time. If you have questions, feel free. This is a safe environment. The biggest thing is helping our individuals understand as best we can. So with that, I'd like to introduce the General Manager of the Canadian Beef Checkoff Agency, Melinda Gurman, and she will introduce her staff that's with her tonight, and we'll jump right into the presentation. So thanks very much, and Melinda, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Brad. And thanks everyone for attending tonight. This is an important update from the National Checkoff Group from the Canadian Beef Checkoff Agency. And I also want to just take a couple minutes to thank Brad Dubois, Karen Schmidt, and I know Kathy's on the line here tonight as well. ABP has been a great partner with us in going through this process, and we just really appreciate their support as we do this. And one of the other, I think, groups I need to thank tonight too is, as we've been going through this journey, and it hasn't been something we just started on yesterday. We've been at this for about a year now, but we've formed a working group that's been populated by representatives from auction marts, dealers, producers, provincial cattle associations to help guide us through this. And you'll hear us reference this working group throughout our presentation tonight. Before I get started on the slide, I also want to just introduce the staff that I have with me here tonight. I have Brad McCollum. He's been with us part-time for a few years, full-time for a couple years. He's based out of Nova Scotia, so it's getting a little late for him already tonight, but we appreciate him taking the time. And Taylor Lindsay is also with us. She's based out of Crossfield. So they're going to be helping me with the presentation tonight. And as Brad Dubois said, we welcome questions throughout. I also just want to acknowledge we have our Canadian Beef Checkoff Agency chair with us this evening, Trevor Welch. Trevor, you can give a little wave there. He's based out of New Brunswick. And so we have good representation from the Checkoff Agency as well. So what we're going to be looking at tonight, is we want to review for you an issue on how we currently collect the national checkoff. We're going to outline that issue. We're going to outline what we've come up with as that solution. We're going to talk about impacts and next steps. And we're also going to talk about how we're going to support you now and in the future through our communications plan as we go through this and help to guide you through this change as well. If we move to the next slide, perfect right there. Thank you, Taylor. So tonight is all about national checkoff, and it is separate from the provincial checkoff. And you'll hear us probably say this more than once tonight too. This isn't about an increase to Alberta's provincial checkoff or anything like that. It's really about how we collect our national checkoff. But why we work with our partners like Alberta Cattle Producers, Alberta Beef Producers, is because it's collected at the same time. National checkoff and the provincial checkoff are collected at the same time. And so here in Alberta, it's $4.50. $2.50 of that comes into us at National Checkoff, where we invest that into marketing, promotion, and research on behalf of all producers in Canada. The other $2 of that $4.50 goes to Alberta Beef Producers to do all of the great work that they do here provincially. So it's a significant investment that we're talking about. We've been collecting a national checkoff in Canada for almost 25 years. And what we've seen now over time is that even though we continue to have a great return on investment, the system, the mechanism that we're using is a little antiquated and could use a little bit of help. And so that's basically what we're looking at in terms of changing this. So as I mentioned, we've been collecting a national checkoff for 25 plus years. And when we started, the industry looked different, obviously, from how it looks now. What we see now is more cattle trading across provincial borders. And when we talk about that national checkoff, that's really that part that we're talking about, cattle that trade across provincial borders. So we're seeing more trade across provincial borders. We're seeing animals move further away from their home province. We've also seen provinces start to change their provincial rates much more frequently, perhaps, than what we had in the past. We used to have a very similar rate all across Canada for the provinces, and now we have quite a range or quite a variation. Here in Alberta, as I mentioned, the total amount collected, which includes the national checkoff, is $4.50. We start to move east, it's going up to $5. Into Ontario, it's into $7. And on some classes of cattle in Quebec, it's over $22. So we've seen a lot of change over the last 25 years as well. On the next slide, once again, this is coming back to cattle trading across those provincial borders, where we take those $2.50 a national checkoff, we invest that into national marketing promotion work, but then we send the remainder back. As I mentioned, $4.50 in Alberta, we take $2.50. If this was Alberta's cattle selling elsewhere, we would send those $2 back to the province of origin, back to Alberta, to be invested, because that's where those cattle were raised. So the changes that we want to make to the system, we feel, are going to ensure that going forward, as we see these changes in our industry, we're going to continue to have a fair and a sustainable system for another 25 years. Next slide, please, Taylor. So this new system to collect national checkoff, to change our system, the one we've had for 25 years, we haven't taken this lightly. We've been consulting, as I said, with many different groups. We've been out to meetings. We've really been focusing our work in BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and a little bit into Manitoba, because as you'll hear tonight, the majority of the change that's going to happen is happening in our Western provinces. And as I mentioned, we have a working group, and this working group is a group of dedicated industry folks from all different walks of the industry. They're great thinkers, and they've been really helping guide us to make sure that we're doing the right thing at the right time. Because obviously, as I mentioned, it's a big change, it's an important change, and we want to make sure we do it right the first time. On the next slide, I think we're moving into now Brad's area, and I'm going to turn the meeting, the deck over to Brad for a few slides. He's going to review for you really what we're talking about in technical terms and look at some of the changes that we're looking at and looking at the current system. So Brad, take it away.
Thanks, Melinda, and good evening, everyone. The next couple of slides, I'm just going to talk about how the current levy mechanism is set up both in Eastern Canada and Western Canada, as well as what's really precipitated some of the changes that we're exploring. So as Melinda already said, one of the things that has changed significantly even in the last few years is as provincial rates change and as provincial cattle associations look at their budgets, we've really had to explore how this impacts. So in 2025, we actually expect to see 3 provinces increase their checkoff. So Saskatchewan Cattle Association has already approved their increase to 525 from 450, and then we expect that to come in force on August 1st. The Beef Farmers of Ontario have approved a rate increase at their annual meeting earlier this year. We expect it later this year. And then Newfoundland and Labrador, which you folks probably wouldn't see very many cattle from, have approved an increase at 250 to go along with one of our other increases. So as Melinda said, this is kind of not misaligned, but it's kind of made a lot of variables in especially Western levy rates. And as those provincial cattle associations increase their levy rates, we mirror those in the federal order. So that's how we get to the levy rate in our order. So mechanically, a province will increase, we will mirror that so that when those cattle trade across provincial borders, we collect the same rate. So one of the things we found as these rates differ more and more between provinces is if the levy rate does not follow the seller, it does a couple of things to the producer and to the cattle association. So as a cattle producer, it may influence your marketing. So there may be a market influence on selling into a province where there's either a higher or lower levy, which is an unfair advantage for everyone. And the other thing too is, and we saw this especially, I think, with the Saskatchewan increase, is when a province has a lot of interprovincial trading, if their federal rate doesn't follow their cattle across provincial borders, it actually doesn't have the same impact on their budget or their total levy collected as it would when it does follow. So this is what really causes us to look at that change. So Taylor, if we can go to the next slide. Oh, do we lose Taylor? Oh, there we're good. Perfect. Thank you very much. So again, we want to make sure that everybody here tonight knows that this is not a change to the Alberta checkoff rate. It's around the mechanics of collecting the checkoff for cattle from outside of Alberta. Alberta producers will not be paying more for checkoff. There's no change to your rate. So just keep that in mind as we go through. So then if we go to the next slide again, this kind of reviews or goes over the current mechanism we have. So we kind of refer to it as an Eastern and a Western mechanism, but really what it means or what it is a mechanism that the levy rate is based on the residence of the seller, or the levy rate is based on the province of the transaction. So in technical terms, if anybody wants to actually look into it, if you look at Section 4 of our federal levy order, that's the levy rate table that says, hey, if the owner of the cattle is from the list of provinces and it's at a certain type of cattle, this is the rate that applies. Now, we do have a special provision within that for Alberta, Saskatchewan, and British Columbia that says, in these provinces, we use the levy rate for the province in which the cattle are sold, which is the way you folks are used to doing it now. So that applies west of Manitoba. A little bit of history behind the two-tiered system or the differential system is that the Western provinces early on in this process did not want to collect tiered rates. The shared majority of their trade amongst them, and because they were basically all the same rate at the time at 450, it made a lot of sense. But again, as we see those rates change and budget influences and marketing decisions being made potentially on these rates, we think that it's very important that the rate is based on the residency of the seller. So next slide, please. So just a little bit of a visualization, sorry, for our current mechanism. So for Alberta and Saskatchewan cattle sold in other provinces, we see that in Western Canada, so right now those rates are still the same. So Alberta into Saskatchewan is 450. Saskatchewan into Alberta is 450. Those cattle are marketed east of that under the Table 4 mechanism. We know that the levy rate is based on the residency of the seller. And then if they go into British Columbia, they're charged the British Columbia rate. So next slide, please. So one of the things that we're getting at here is the issue if we don't change the mechanism in the way we collect. When the Saskatchewan rate increases later this summer, the Saskatchewan rate would only apply in Saskatchewan and eastern provinces. Those cattle that are marketed across the border into Alberta would only attract the $4.50 Alberta levy, and then $5 into British Columbia. So you can see how there would be a marketing advantage for a Saskatchewan producer of 75 cents per head for marketing into Alberta. So we want to try to avoid that where possible. The other thing that this does is the exact thing that we're trying to avoid for Alberta sellers is that when Alberta cattle would sell into Saskatchewan, they would attract a $5.25 levy and not the $4.50. So that's what we're trying to avoid for two reasons. Alberta producers are not going to see a levy rate increase, so it would be unfair to collect at a higher rate on them in another province. And it would be a marketing disadvantage at the same time for Alberta producers to sell into Saskatchewan. So if we go to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Next one. I talked about those both at the same time. Sorry. So I think this one is back to Melinda.
Yeah, that's right. So thanks, Brad. And I know it can be, especially if this is your first time hearing this, it can be a little bit confusing. But basically what we're trying to do, as Brad said, is ensure market neutrality for those purchasing cattle so that folks aren't trying to maybe seek a 75-cent checkoff, maybe moving away from the markets that they traditionally would sell into. So as Brad said, that's when it really hit home for us that there was an issue, is that now in the West, when Alberta, Saskatchewan in particular, will no longer have the same provincial levy rate at $4.50, we can have these negative impacts. And so I think this was one of the big things that our working group really hit on, because there were dealers, there were auction mart folks there, is that this really could be a market neutrality issue in terms of the buying and trading cattle, particularly along provincial borders. So we do know we have a lot of auction marts, for example, along provincial borders, both Saskatchewan, Alberta, and Alberta and BC. And as Brad said, for those provincial cattle associations that have increased their checkoff rates for budgetary needs to be able to increase revenue to support their programming, if they're marketing a significant amount of cattle into an area where they're going to attract that lower checkoff rate, that's not helping them in terms of their financial needs that they're working on as well. So I hope that made sense in terms of high level what the issue is. It's really a big impact. It could have a big impact in Alberta and in Saskatchewan. So on the next slide, we've been working on solving that problem. And so the working group, as I mentioned, we've started consulting with folks over a year ago. Our working group was formed a few months ago. And they've been guiding us, and they've agreed that the proposed changes are the right ones. And we're going to continue, even though we're moving forward with this change effective August 1st, we're going to continue to engage with our working group because they're really key to helping us ensure a smooth as possible implementation, and also work on the appropriate communications and supports that we need to have as well going forward. So on the next slide, as we move into a one system mechanism in Canada. You know, Brad mentioned we have this east and west system right now. The change really is going to happen out west. Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC are the ones that are going to be impacted by this, because in Brad's slides that showed the country, currently the mechanism we are changing to, that is how they currently do it, Manitoba all the way to the Maritimes. So no impact for them, but definitely an impact in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and in BC. So the levy rate, as Brad said, will move from wherever the cattle are traded. When they trade across a provincial border, it's going to equal their province of origin. So Saskatchewan's 525 will be 525 in Alberta. Alberta's 450 will be 450 in Saskatchewan. So no matter where they sell in Canada, the provincial rate will follow them. And that's how it is currently done in Manitoba East, as I had said. On the next slide, I think Brad's going to just, you know, we're going through this a few times just because it's a bit laborious, but it is important that we really kind of talk to you about what we're looking at and why. And so we're being a bit repetitive just so that it sinks in, because it's one of these things that we think we get it and then we step back and we go, oh, wait a minute, what about this? So Brad, I'm going to turn it back over to you to review in a little more detail what that's going to look like again.
Yes, thanks, Melinda. So just a little bit of a visualization for everyone to get a look at what our words mean. So we've got a rancher here based in Alberta. They're ready to market their cattle. Now you can see whether they're marketed from British Columbia all the way out to the East Coast, that producer or that rancher, the levy that they will pay will be $4.50. So we've gotten rid of that marketing disadvantage for going into either British Columbia or Saskatchewan, and all producers will be now paying the exact same rate, no matter where they market their cattle, at the provincial rate of the Alberta Beef Producers. The same thing as if we go to the next slide, your neighbors in Saskatchewan, that Saskatchewan rancher chooses to market their cattle. Now there's no advantage or disadvantage to them, no matter which way they go, east or west. So over into Alberta, you folks as Alberta remitters will now collect $5.25 from them, not $4.50. The rest of your remittance process will remain the same. You're just going to collect a different rate. The same way as if you buy cattle in from British Columbia, you would collect $5 from $5.25. And we're going to show, sorry, instead of $4.50. And we'll show you here in a few minutes some potential changes that you'll see in that really nice ABP remittance form to help lay all that out in a nice table. So if we can go to the next slide. Perfect. So as we went through this process, we also identified a couple of other small things within our levies order that we needed to clean up a little bit. And mostly because in the eastern provinces of Ontario and Quebec, when you look at their rate tables, they actually have different rates for different types of cattle. Quebec in particular has 5 different rates. So they have a bob calf rate, a started calf rate, dairy cross rate, fed cattle rate, and a cull cow rate. In Ontario, because we have the veal farmers of Ontario and the beef farmers of Ontario, they have 2 separate rates for their respective classes as well. So we've done a little bit of work helping to identify and further define what those classes of cattle are to make sure that it works within the levies order to ensure that the correct association, especially in Ontario, and the correct working committee in Quebec, those funds are allocated appropriately and the correct rate is collected. We're also doing some other minor administrative changes that won't impact your day-to-day reporting or remitting. They're just some cleanups because this is, I think, Melinda, the biggest change we've ever done and probably the first kind of overhaul of the levies order in about 20 years since it was first drafted, beyond some of the small changes that we've made. So our next slide actually looks a little bit like what you could see on that table in your Alberta Beef Producers remittance form. So right now there's provincial or province listed with their rates, So now what you might see are more provinces. Again, Ontario beef classes, so feeder culls and fed cattle, the veal classes there, and then the rates. So again, this is going to be, I think, a relatively easy exercise in arithmetic. So number of head times the rate, still all the deductions and commissions and so on, and HST will apply as per usual. You'll just see some more classes. And Taylor's going to talk a little bit, I think, about some communication tools here in a little bit. And one of the things that we're working on is to help visualize, especially for some of those veal classes, the difference between the started calf and feeder cattle or feeder calves, for example, and what that means in identifying them. So that will be along in some of the comm stuff that Taylor's going to talk about. So Melinda, if you want to give us a little bit of a background on where we've been and where we're going on the next slide, which I think is our timeline.
Yeah, and just before I get to that too, I know that table can look really ominous with all those different classes in there. But, you know, for example, if you look at Ontario beef and they have 3 classes, fed, cattle, cull, and feeder, it's all just beef. And so it's just the one rate. So there's things too that we can clean up in there as well. Some of the communication materials that Taylor will talk about is we're developing some visuals along with the definitions that help with this. But also, we do not see all of these animals from Ontario, Quebec flow into the West either. You know, definitely you see Alberta, you see BC, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. You're going to see beef feeders coming in. You may see the Ontario veal started calf come in, and a lot of those are kind of those dairy beef crosses that are coming in. So, you know, once again, I know it looks bad, but out here in Alberta, we're not going to see all of those classes of animals. But and as I said, we've got some pretty detailed communication materials that will help guide you through this as well. But just in terms of our timeline, since we established our working group, we've been moving really fast. And it was one thing we actually had planned to do this over a few more months. But the working group said, you know, we think you've got the right solution. Let's do this ASAP. Let's do this now and get this done before the fall run. And then we can make our way through this. We can figure this way out as well. And even once we flip the switch and implement, it doesn't mean we're not here to help support in terms of, you know, making those changes, filling out the forms, answering questions. So the working group really challenged us to get this done now. And we are on track. We will have our regulatory changes completed by August 1st. We'll have materials out to all the collectors and remitters of checkoff. And then, as I said, we'll still have lots of work to do for that ongoing communication and support as we make our way through this change. So the timeline shortened up, but I think we're still in a pretty good place. And we're going to be doing a lot more of these engagement sessions too in other provinces. But with the communication materials that Taylor's going to chat a little bit about now, I think this is going to help things along also. So Taylor, why don't you take it away and lead us through some of your communication plans?
Sure. Thanks, Belinda. Yeah, this is a big change for what it, you know, what it looks like. At the end of the day, everybody still gets to go on, you know, doing as they do, collecting and remitting. We're really just looking at a change of what that rate looks like depending on what border those cattle are crossing. So we know that we have to communicate this change and we need to get it to everybody who's going to be making those collections and remitting to ABP and to all those other provincial associations. And those 3 Western provinces are kind of our main target. So we really have to focus on, you know, getting that message of what, why, and when. You know, that August 1st date is creeping up pretty quickly. And we kind of had to speed things up, like Melinda said. So we're getting our feet under us and making sure we have all of the right messages in a lot of different tools in a lot of different ways, because not everybody communicates the same. We want to make sure everything's implemented smoothly and we disrupt your business as little as possible. And that we get all of the collectors and remitters the right information and the ability to share that information with those that you're collecting and remitting with. So we've got we're working on a lot of these key tools. We're really going to lean on our provincial partners at ABP and those other Western provinces to help us, manage that relationship with you guys and with other remitters. We'll be developing things like cheat sheets and one pagers, frequently asked questions for your front desk or accounting staff or you yourselves. So when you're taking those remittances and remitting them to ABP, you can answer those questions of, hey, you bought cattle across that Saskatchewan border. Why does that rate look different? And you'll have good answers and good support as to why. But we're always going to be there with ABP to answer those and help you answer those questions as they go. We're going to be doing, like Melinda said, some additional webinars in BC and Saskatchewan, hopefully to have this same conversation so that, your friends across the border that you do business with are going to be on the same page and will be delivering those same messages. We're going to be working with a lot of the auction mart associations, LMAC, and organizations like that so that they're in the loop as well and we can all kind of sing from that same songbook. You'll probably see some things in provincial and national media kind of talking about this. So you should be getting this message hit in a few different ways. And we're hoping that if there are places that we're missing, that we can work with ABP and maybe hear from you guys as to, what else we can do to make sure that these conversations are happening. I just want to see what's on my next slide so I can, some of the other things we're going to be helping do is we'll help ABP, and which helps you guys figure out what those remittance forms are going to look like. We want to make this as easy as we can with as minimal disruption, like I said. So we want to make it easy for you to make those determinations on what that rate is for those different cattle across those borders. The last thing we need is for you guys to have headaches. So we want to make sure this is easy and we get those dollars, the right dollars, back to where they go and kind of communicate why that change is happening. So Melinda kind of showed a bigger picture as far as the timeline goes. We're kind of starting to break this out into what you're going to see and when. The big thing I really want to stress is that ABP is a great partner and they're going to be your first line of contact through most of this. And we're going to be there lockstep with them the whole way. But they're very capable. They know what's going on. They're taking the lead on this very well. And we're happy to work with them. This is our kind of preview webinar. You'll maybe see some heads up emitters. ABP is going to be getting some toolkits. We're going to be coming up with things like newsletter information, website information. This is all stuff that you'll have access to as remitters. And if you have a set of people you want to communicate this to, customers, people you work with, remit for, this is all going to be very much available to you as well. If there's anything that works or doesn't work, things like that, we're happy to have those conversations and make sure that we can customize things that makes your life a lot easier. So, I think as far as communications, we're working on it. You'll start to see things probably as soon as next week-ish, or maybe the week after, at the provincial association end. And those things will start to kind of trickle down into our remitters and beef producers across the West for sure, and a little bit into Eastern Canada as well.
Thanks, Taylor. I think that brings us to the end of our formal presentation that we wanted to do. And as I said, this change will take seeing it a few times for it to kind of make sense as well. That's why the communication tools, the communication plans that are going to be rolled out shortly are going to be important. But by no means is this the end of the conversation as well. I think, Brad DeBow, we're at the point where I can turn it back over to you. I just want to thank ABP and everyone attending tonight for this opportunity, for your time this evening. We're happy to engage and answer questions now or later as well at any time as we go through this. It's just the beginning of it. But we're here to provide as many answers as we can. So Brad, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Thanks, Melinda, and thank you to your team. That was a fantastic presentation. We're hopeful that through these types of conversations that we help our remitters understand this process as we enter the fall run. And your presentation did a very, very good job of outlining that information. So we appreciate that very much. Just out of just to make the folks that did join us tonight, we sent over a total of about 500 invites to either join through, like through email or by letter. And for email, for those individuals that we didn't have updated email addresses. So there's a lot of education left to do. We really appreciate the small group that did come to this meeting tonight. We would ask that if you hear through your channels that you encourage, if there's others that have questions and you want to point out that either ABP or the agency is prepared to help those individuals understand if they have any questions that couldn't make tonight, or point them to the video. Just take a moment. Is anybody have any questions or comments about what they've seen tonight? And please feel free. This is a safe environment to reach out right now. And of course, I know that in some cases on group calls like this, it can be sometimes a little awkward. So we appreciate that on 100%. It doesn't mean that you can't reach out to myself or my staff at ABP or the agency after you've had some time to digest what you've heard tonight. And we're here to offer, whatever we can for clarification.
Brad, maybe I can add a little bit of something to, I don't know if it'll spark conversation or not, but one of the things that we haven't touched on so far, but I think would be very important, is for anybody running any sort of software, whether it's auction mart software, dealer software, from the major software providers, or maybe it's an in-house developed program, or even an Excel sheet. I'm not a programmer, we're not programmers, but if you have questions about how you may need to change some of those software filtering systems to make sure that the cattle fall from the right province into the right categories, so the right or correct rate is collected, feel free to reach out. I do have ongoing meetings with most of the software companies as it is now, or at least the major 7. So some of those will definitely kind of happen automatically as part of their regular updates, but if not, feel free to reach out.
Great, thanks. I did see a question come in, Karen.
So the question in the chat was, what are your thoughts on directly submitting to the specific provinces instead of using Alberta's submission form?
The standard practice, and I'll ask Brad or Taylor to jump in as well. So the standard practice is to remit just directly to the Provincial Cattle Association that is in your home province. Why? It actually saves some paperwork as well. You're just remitting to one location. You're filling out the form, putting in the numbers with the right rates, sending the money just to one place. It does keep things cleaner as well. It also just helps if there's ever challenges or problems with, the collection, for us to also sort that out. It just streamlines, makes it a little more efficient. But I think that's one of the biggest things, is it's a one-step process for remitters that you just automatically do it to your home province. Brad, Taylor, did you have any comments on that one also?
Yeah, the only thing I would say from a practical point of view, that's definitely how we prefer to be set up. Having said that, we do know that some remitters do remit directly to the province. So if they're buying maybe an order or 1 or 2 or something like that in a different province, they may do it. We're never going to say no, but definitely our preferred method is to remit based on your home province. It does save a few steps.
I think it allows for, ABP and other provinces go through audits from time to time. It helps in making sure that there is a clean understanding of how the cattle trail with the dollars that flow then out of ABP to the agency, and then the agency disperses to those other provinces. It I think helps to make sure that we kind of keep all of it in one place, and you can come back to that one spot and do your proper audit from that, and then trace out beyond. If it's going to all the different provinces, it could just be a longer process for those that might be involved. This should speed it up and make it less complicated. Any other questions or comments? Well, I think then if there's nothing further, we will Thank you very much, Ramona. We appreciate it. Uh, we really appreciate everyone here that took the time to spend a couple, what is it? About 50 minutes with us this evening to talk about some of the changes that you folks are going to be seeing. I know that there's going to be additional presentations and so forth coming up. Please reach out if you have questions down the road after you've had a chance to digest some of what you've heard tonight, and we'll go from there. Pray for rain, and thanks again, everyone, for taking the time to be with us tonight. We really appreciate it. Have a good evening.
Thanks, everyone.